Ladies and gentlemen, if I could kindly have your attention. In just a moment, we're going to begin the funeral services of Mr. Kenneth Arkin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are humbled and honored to have representatives from the United States Army Honor Guard in memory of Mr. Kenneth Arkin. For those of you who are joining us on live stream, we welcome you, and for those of you that are here, we ask everyone to take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off. At this time, we're going to begin the ceremony for military honors. We want to thank the Honor Guard from the United States Army for being here. At this time, we're going to begin the religious portion of the funeral service. Rabbi Jeffrey Weil and Cantor Dan Gale from Ezra Habonim, the Niles Township Jewish congregation, will be officiating. At this time, he's going to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya, of tearing of the ribbon with the family. I ask the three of you to please rise.
In the Bible, our biblical forebears, when something calamitous would happen or something shocking, something terribly sad would happen, they would tear their garments, exposing, in a sense, their internal wounds, their sadness, and their injury, emotional injury. And so that's what this Kriya ritual is about. Kriya means tearing, and you were wearing the Kriya ribbons, Melissa and Allison, over your hearts, as is appropriate for children of the deceased, and Judy on the other side. So the blessing that we will recite, which you can repeat after me, acknowledges God as the Dayan Ha'emet, the judge of truth. So please recite after me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Dayan Ha'emet. We say Amen. Adonai, ma Adam v'teda ehu, ben enosh v'techashvehu, Adam lehevel dama, yamav ketzel over, baboki yatzitz v'chalaf la'erev yimalel v'yavesh, tashev enosh adaka v'tomer, shuvu v'nei Adam. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you would even be mindful of us? We are all of us just a breath. Our days are a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning it shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening of all of our lives, the grass fades and withers. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu b'nei Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise. Would that we understood whither we go from here, for when we die, we carry nothing with us, not our riches, not our glory. But God, you say, Shmor tam urei yashar. Mark the wholehearted. Behold the upright. Those are the ones who shall find shalom, who shall find ultimate peace. Friends, we gather on this rainy day to remember one who was tam v'yashar. He was wholehearted and upright. He was just a very decent, good man, a real mensch, Ken Arkin. Our scriptures have something to say to us, some message for us for every moment of our lives, the times of celebration and the times of sadness as well. And it is appropriate, of course, at this time to hear and recite the 23rd Psalm. After my colleague Cantor Dan Gale chants the 23rd Psalm for us, we will read it together in English.
מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר. בנוד דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפש ישובב ינחני במגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא ירא כי אתה עמדי. שידך משענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנתו ושמן ראשי. גוסי רוויה אך טוב הצדק ירדפוני כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Esa enai el harim me'ain yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. I lift mine eyes up to the mountains. From whence comes my help? My help comes from the eternal God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. Behold, the Shomer Yisrael, the protector of Israel, neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian and your protection at your right hand. May the sun not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. May God guard you from all harm. May God guard your soul, your going out and your coming forth, now and forever. The third chapter of Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes, presents this idea that everything in life, although it's a difficult idea sometimes to really understand and grasp, but that everything in life proceeds and unfolds in a way that it is meant to, that there's indeed a time for everything that happens in our lives. And our tradition nudges us, guides us in that direction, as difficult as that might be through our experiences, to grasp and understand that. L'kol zman l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve, a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time when we gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time when we must refrain from our embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear, a time to sow, a time for silence, and a time to speak. And so this is an appropriate time to speak words in tribute of memory of Kenneth Arkin. One of our sages named Ben Zoma in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, it's often called, posed a question that was really deceptively simple. He asked, Ezehu Ashir, who is the one who is truly wealthy? The wealthy, he answered, because he asked the question and he offered an answer, is the Savea B'chalko. The wealthy is the one who is satisfied with his or her lot or portion. And that portion is typically understood as material things. If you're satisfied with what you have, then you're wealthy. But I personally have come to believe that it's not merely about, and maybe not primarily about, material things. Maybe it's really about how we understand our allotment, our chelek, our portion of time. If one is satisfied and fulfilled by what one does with one's time during this life, then one is truly wealthy. How does one fill, how do we all fill our portion of time? How does one fill one's time from waking up until going to bed? From birth unto death? Ken Arkin really filled his time well. He filled it with good, hard work. He filled it with nature and photography. He filled it with music and spices and cooking and entertainment. And most of all, Ken filled his allotted portion with his family whom he adored and who adored him in return. Ken was the second son of Shirley and Aaron, younger brother to Sheldon. It was a close family. Despite the incident of the whack by the older brother upon the head of the younger brother with a violin, they lived on the Great West Side. Aaron, Ken's dad, ran a tavern, actually at Kedzie and Roosevelt. Shirley, always cautious, worried about this profession of her husband's. When the family moved to Budlawn Woods, Ken was a senior at this point in Marshall, and Ken was uncomfortable at first going to a new high school. So he schlepped for a while back to Marshall. Cousin Larry will be talking about this likely in a few minutes. But he ultimately graduated from Senn. Ken, after graduation, was not completely sure what he wanted to do with his life. He studied for a time at Wright College. And one day around this time, he goes to Albany Park. He's a young man, and he goes to visit a friend. His friend lived with his own family, and they happened to live in the same building as a certain young lady. Her name is Judy. Ken was no doubt impressed with Judy. I think we can all agree on that. And Judy, meanwhile, marveled at this young Ken Arkin. Why? Because, of course, he looked like Mr. Dermopoulos, one of Judy's teachers from childhood. Is that right? Grade school. Mr. Dermopoulos, Judy always felt, resembled a Greek god. And that is precisely what Judy saw in young Ken Arkin. She thought he looked like a Greek god. But Ken was actually on his way at this point to becoming, or would soon be on his way to becoming, a Jewish American soldier, not a Greek god. And he did spend the next 2 years on base in Heidelberg, Germany, working in a classified position in the field of encryption. During these couple years, he traveled throughout Europe. He grew, he matured, and then he returned. He and Judy had not been in touch during those couple of years. But he returned, a couple of years older, wiser, and he visited that family again in Albany Park, and he and Judy were reacquainted. Just by coincidence, if there are such coincidences in these sorts of stories. That summer, I believe, Judy was taking the L with her mother to the insurance exchange, and Ken was commuting to the merchandise mart on the same train. And so they would schmooze, Ken and this pretty young lady and her mom, and what a sweet way to establish a relationship. Yes, there was that little snag of another girl who had her eyes on that young Jewish Greek god. But hey, things have a way of working out when they're meant to be. Ken and Judy dated. They went to, for instance, her senior prom. She was still in high school. They went to her senior prom snowstorm. It was January. Ken had rolled up his pant legs to protect his pants from the snow, and they remained rolled up throughout the entire prom. And even later that night when they went to see Sammy Davis Jr. perform. But Ken and Judy, they were falling in love. They didn't even notice his rolled up pant legs. Judy and Ken, note the letters Judy and J and K right next to each other in the alphabet, just like they were throughout their years. They married at the Belmont Hotel April 16th, 1961, 61 years ago. Again, it was April in Chicago, so obviously, snowstorm. Judy, nervous the rabbi wouldn't show up because of the snowstorm, cried. But, you know, neither rain, nor sleet, nor gloom of night, nor Chicago's April snowstorms will stay good rabbis from their appointed chuppahs. And so the wedding went off as planned, and they married. Ken was getting his career at this point in motion. He was interested in sales. Now, it's interesting because one might not immediately think of Ken Arkin as salesman. He was not that sort of typical, stereotypical salesman, you know, glad-handing, back-slapping kind of person. He was a much more subdued kind of fellow. But that is precisely why, throughout his career, his clients, through Continental distributors, appreciated him. Ken was always, no matter what he was doing, just an authentic and straightforward person, as well as we know, a very pleasant person. His clients knew that they were dealing with a mensch. The Arkins, as a young couple and as the family was growing, lived in a couple of homes before settling with Melissa and Allison in Skokie. Judy was in charge at home, the house, the girls, Taffy, which was the dog. Ken, do I have that right? Taffy was the dog. Ken worked hard, and when he was at home, he was really just content to snuggle with Taffy. It was relaxing. Also relaxing for Ken Arkin was when he, in the midst of crisscrossing Chicagoland during his work, would seek quiet and perhaps a certain degree of spiritual sustenance within our local nature preserves, our forest preserves. Nature was a very important part of Ken Arkin's life. He felt an internal tug to be in the midst of it. He loved photography, and he loved taking pictures of it as well. He and Judy supported the Nature Conservancy throughout the years, a worthy organization. He grew things at home, he grew flowers and so forth. And I find it interesting. It's not as if Ken was guided in this direction. You know, it's not as if his parents were very into this sort of thing. They didn't emphasize it, but Ken was drawn to nature, and it remained a very central part of his life, or an important part of his life, throughout his life. In addition to environmental causes, Ken also supported veterans organizations, and I'm so pleased that the Honor Guard was here to honor him today. They support, still I'm sure, wounded warriors, reflecting his own pride of his years of military service. Socially, Ken was often a quiet one. He was not very loud. He was not overly opinionated. He would be interested in learning, for sure. He wanted to hear your opinions about issues. But when he was in groups, he often would sort of just hang back, observing. But be not fooled, for he would often suddenly let loose what has been called by multiple people a zinger, a sharp, sarcastic line that would leave everyone else laughing, or perhaps just with their mouths agape at what he said. Mostly Ken just wanted everyone to be safe and secure. He had this concern about this. His concern included extended family. He was beloved by many. He was a wonderful uncle and beloved by nieces and nephews, including Debbie, Karen, and Laura, and he was beloved by many, many more as well. And of course, he was especially loving to and concerned about the well-being of Melissa and Allison, his daughters. He was a loving, reliable, dependable father, and he was a bit of a worrier at times. Did they know what to do in a given situation? Did they know how to get from here to there? Don't forget your keys. Melissa lived on her own in Spain for 5 years, and still her dad would check to make sure she knew how to get to the airport. Yes, he was in many ways chill. He'd be laid back, watching the Bears or Westerns or Seinfeld, things he loved doing with Allison. But he had his worries as well, expressing them quietly or just living with them silently. Thank God, all was well. Thank God. Ken retired at about 61 years old. That was truly a new beginning for Ken Arkin. Ken and Judy, extraordinarily compatible partners throughout their life together. They took trips to Italy, Spain, and Israel, including one trip to Israel with our congregation, Ezra Habanim, the Niles Township Jewish congregation, a few years ago. So it was a great honor for me to be with both of them during those days. They enjoyed lots and lots of cruises, 15 years of vacationing in Mexico. Ken also, as I said before, enjoyed cooking with exotic spices. He liked scratching off lottery tickets. His preferred birthday present, he once won $1,000, by the way. And of course, he loved, as many of us know and witnessed, loved working in the Botanic Gardens, where my family and I were delighted to see him a couple of times. He appreciated, this is in his retirement, he appreciated that simple work in the midst of that supreme natural beauty. He made people who would come in just feel comfortable and welcome, especially children. He was very sweet with children. But by far, the greatest development in the last couple of decades for Ken was the new generation of his family. Ken was never happier, literally never displayed more emotion and excitement than when he learned he was going to be called Grandpa. This mild-mannered man, when he got that news, was visibly thrilled. It was in his body. And he and Adrian were buddies from the very, very beginning and for the last 20 years. Even before Adrian remembers, for Ken early on was Adrian's regular nanny. And Ken truly cherished that time. Ken Arkin's life, from childhood through the Army, then marriage and family and career, and then a very fruitful, active last couple of decades in retirement. Each part of his life, day by day, year by year, decade by decade, was well lived. Ken Arkin indeed spent his allotted time on this earth well, very well, all the while being the decent and pleasant mensch, the good man, the wonderful husband, father, grandfather, and more that we all knew him to be. May we all learn from his very good example, Zichrono Livracha, his memory for blessing. And we say, Amen. I call forward now Cousin Larry.
I am Cousin Larry. Kenny and I celebrated our birthdays 6 months apart. And I will always be thankful for the time that we had when our families were together in the early days on the west side of Chicago. Kenny and I spent a lot of time together, had wonderful times playing, and one thing stood out in my mind as I've been going through this past few days. I remember on Saturdays, I used to love to go to the Gold Theater on Roosevelt and Holman and see the cowboy pictures. Kenny, at the same time, was going to the 20th on Roosevelt and Central Park, and Kenny loved Frankenstein, Dracula, that type of movie. But the thing that stood out was how many times Aunt Shirley had to go into the theater and get him out. Otherwise, he'd sit through those same movies all over again and just enjoyed them like he had never seen them before. When my mother and I moved to the north side, I remember Kenny used to come and spend weekends, and we really had a good time. The two cousins just hung out together and had a wonderful time. Later, as time went on, as was mentioned, when Kenny was a senior at Marshall High School, my aunt and uncle moved to the north side. And that's a really hard time for anybody to be changing schools, but it kind of was necessary. And I enjoyed that time so much because he and I, again, had the opportunity to hang out. And I remember after school, we went bowling, we did all kind of things, and I really enjoyed it. And I even remember when in school I broke my wrist. It was Kenny who drove me to the hospital, stayed with me the whole time until my parents came there, and that's just the way it was. Kenny was my link, my connection to the West Side, and to me, that has always meant something. That's where the Arkin family was. As was mentioned, my mother and I, we lived above the tavern. Kenny, my aunt, uncle, and cousin Shelley lived very close nearby, and it just meant a lot. We were a real cohesive family there. And so, now that I think about it, not having Kenny as the connection, and I knew when he was around, everything was okay. There was still that connection to the West Side, still connection to Shelley, to my aunt and uncle, to the family. And now that connection is gone, and I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss it a lot. Oh, I know.
Thank you, Larry, so much. Judy? And Melissa?
Get my mask off. My glasses out here. My readers. First, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and those who are on virtually all across the country. My other nieces and nephews and sister-in-law and other cousins. Appreciate it that you're supporting our family in this way. So I'm going to go far into my past and show how Kenny was so considerate and caring to his mom and to me. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go back a little bit. So I'd like to say a few words about my late mother-in-law, Shirley Arkin. It was her nurturing and accentuating kindness and caring that influenced her two sons, my late brother-in-law, Shelley and Kenny to grow into the men that they became, loving husbands, fathers, and grandfathers. When we got engaged, like 61 years ago, Mom asked Kenny how he was going to handle not eating kosher meat any longer because I wasn't kosher. Kenny, being the intermediary, discussed the issue in such a nice way and asked if I wouldn't mind buying kosher meat after we got married. I agreed, and we started buying the meat from Mom's butcher. Later on, when she discovered that my father wouldn't be walking me down the aisle, but my stepfather would because he raised me, she was really surprised. She felt it would be against Jewish tradition. Kenny told me how she felt, so I called Rabbi Grobart, some of you might know of him, our wedding officiant, to ask if it was against Jewish tradition. It definitely was not. Again, Kenny, as the intermediary, explained to his mom in such a nice way, and she was now okay with it. Kenny was always supportive of all my ambitions, including going to paralegal school in my 50s and becoming very involved in Hadassah. He was my rock. My dear husband, rest in peace. May your memory be a blessing. Thank you. Thank you. I hold it together.
Thank you so much, Judy. That was beautiful. Leida hi reshit, uftirat tachlit, achayim kamasahem, kahalicha, tzmicha, b'shalav l'shalav. Birth is a beginning, death is a destination, but life is a journey, a going and a growing from stage to stage. And now, sadly, the life journey of Ken Arkin has come to its conclusion. O God, we see life as through windows that open upon unto eternity. We see that love endures, that the soul endures, as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than just grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave rather a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your divine love and glory. We now rise for the memorial prayer. I invite Cantor Dan Gale to lead us in the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim, in Hebrew, and then I will recite it in English.
תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים, במעלות קדושים, קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע, מזהירים את נשמת קלמן מנדל בן אהרון ושרגא רבקה, שהלך לעולמו. בגן עדן, בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתו. אנה בואו על רחמים, הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, ינוח בשלום על משכבו. ונאמר אמן.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence with the holy and the pure who glow like the light of the heavens to Kenneth Arkin, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence and within the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and we say, Amen. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery in Arlington Heights. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Also, please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to a cemetery. The Shiva will continue here at the funeral home from 3:30 to 7:30. For those of you who will be returning, we will not open the doors until the family arrives from the cemetery. Memorial contributions in his memory to Ezra Habonim, the Niles Township Jewish Congregation, or Hadassah. For those of you who are online, all that information you could find on our website. And for those of you who are here, that information is on the service folder. At this time, I ask everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Kenneth Arkin along with his family and the clergy from the chapel. Then you may return to your cars.